Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to part two. Can everyone just give me a thumbs up to let me know that we're all back on here with the way that we are here in Australia? What are we, Gene? We're in
First world country, third world IT services.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I'll just give it another second before we kick on. I do have Michelle's response here that says hopefully this can continue as it's very interesting discussion. Thanks, guys, for the effort. We're going to give everything a go. You know what it's like, and we'll just see if it comes back on. Obviously, you know, when you're working with technology, I think I had better technology when I was on the road. CB Boyd says, yes, G-Man, we're very interested. And I think the material is still good. Can I get some thumbs up? Just a thumbs up to say we are live and it's not just going through the chat. Just one thumbs up. First one that comes up, I'll scream you out and give you a it's on. Thank you. All right. So I think where we were just talking about the situation.
Lack of discipline.
The lack of discipline.
Lack of discipline. Yeah. We're going to change track just a little bit because this is a really cool comment.
Okay.
And then we'll go back to Linda's comment that she made.
Yeah.
So franchisees coming on for the system that we recreated for developing young drivers properly so they don't crash. Mm-hmm. Policemen. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about what goes on in regional New South Wales.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And he said, it's not what you think. They do know. They know the risk. They know the consequences. The problem is that we've taken every ounce of aspiration away from their lives. They can't get jobs. So without a job, well, how do they make money? If they can't make money, well, how do they have a house? If they can't have a house, well, what's the point of having a family? And they all want a family. So if they can't do that, why bother? So they literally go out with the expressed intent that a life ends that night, whether it be through drugs, alcohol, whatever, will actually fix the world of pain. And that needs to be the wake-up call that we're going through. They're not irresponsible like we want to believe them to be. And the Drive Cam project with 60 Minutes showed them to be more responsible, especially when their peers were around. But what did we do? We created a whole range of legislation that separated them even further and took that dynamic away.
That 60 minutes, I saw that 60 Minutes one that you did. You put a whole bunch of people in front of a camera, they're going to behave properly, especially when they get invited in.
No, it was really, sorry to cut you off and interrupt. So the cameras were fitted to the cars and they activated on G-force. So brake too hard, accelerate too hard, corner too hard. Camera pre-records 10 seconds, post-records 10 seconds, and gives you a 20-second window into their behavior.
Yeah.
Now, no different to the seatbelt cameras that we've now got and the phone cameras that we've now got.
What's a seatbelt camera?
Well, if you're driving without a seatbelt, gone.
You mean the overhead seatbelt camera?
Correct.
Sorry, yeah. I thought you were meaning in the car.
That's it. People's attention span is, oh, that's right. And then they forget about it. And we found that with all these students. Within less than 3 or 4 days, they'd forgotten about the cameras.
Yes.
And by the time we hit the 2-week mark, they didn't care about the cameras.
Yeah.
So the ones that were going to drive like that, that's how they drove. The ones that wanted to use it where we could coach them, they were using it as a tool to improve themselves. And then what we did was we gave them parameters around their driving to give them a different focus on their driving. So we give them techniques to show them how we could reduce their fuel consumption. Now, we could get them to do nearly 20% less burn on their fuel. So then we'd extrapolate that out and say, okay, every month, you're now going to get a free tank of fuel. What's a tank of fuel cost? How much work did you have to do in this job that you absolutely hate to make enough money for that? Well, if you saved up every tank of fuel, that's now going to buy you a holiday at the end of the year. Bang. Instant change.
Do you honestly believe that you can change driver behavior? Because once that's
we gave Griffith University a sample of 1,000 students out of the 4,000 we'd run through the program. For a demographic or a third world crash in their first 3 months, their post-license crash spike is a 3,000% straight line up. Now, what that tells you is the approach and the emphasis around just getting your license is not preparing them in any way for a driver. The two are, the correlation's just not there. That's why you've got a spike. Yeah. And if you turned it upside down, it was a business plan, you spend 12-month planning in your business plan and you implement it and your business fails, you had a bad plan. No business would function like that. But that's how we're preparing the drivers. So we gave Griffith a sample of 1,000 students. They put a person on whose job was just to phone each one up and ask them questions. We had one crash in 3 years, who ironically was a student that decided he'd try multitasking as he was driving. We keep following up our clients, and the most interesting thing that we find when we follow them up is that then, forget the not crashing part, because that's massively significant. They're actually telling us what everyone around them is doing wrong. The people that they won't hop into a car with, the shortcuts that the people have taken in getting a license, and how that's resulted in a driving behavior that they don't feel comfortable with. So their level of awareness is heightened as well. Their maturity behind the wheel is heightened because they actually understand what their job is to achieve, but they enjoy going for a drive. It's not a chore.
Yeah.
It was really, really interesting. When I started this business, I didn't set out to create the world's best driver. I set out to fix a marketing problem. That was it. I was working in F1 with Merck. I was contracting to all these different brands. And every time we did a job, we'd finish and we'd say, who teaches these people how to drive? Somebody should fix it. The vehicle manufacturers, the insurers, or the government. Vehicle manufacturers, they're an engineering firm. Their whole business is selling product, not teaching people. The government, their whole business is compliance. It's not education. And insurance, their whole business is risk. No one, that's not their thing. What I thought worked out was how interesting. We didn't understand our value proposition. We couldn't define what it was that we actually did. And somebody had to pay for our clients to come to us because no one understood what it was that they were buying. That was the problem I set out to fix. I didn't understand any of these other things. I just had to fix the barriers to entry for a vehicle brand. And that was, how do we change the chain of liability? How do we qualify each and every step so we have a consistent deliverable? All those sort of things. That was what I set out to fix. In the middle of that, it wasn't until I was talking with Professor Ian Glendon, who was one of the most foremost authors in the field of applied psychology of driving. He basically said mid-meeting, he said, you've got no idea what you've done, have you? And I went, nope. And he unpacked it. And that was what we'd actually achieved. So we're in an industry space, and this is what's so sad. We're in an industry space where anything that you do is considered good. Now, that's horrific. We set out to make a documentary on this whole subject, which is how I got into trouble with my business that I explained earlier. And then on the way back, so we set out to do what the government said was going to kill us. We had a group of guys, high-powered, custom-built cars, driving a long distance to go to a car race. And on the way, we stopped and interviewed really, really cool people, like a guy that used to race the Paris-Dakar on his own and car racing champions. People that were racing in the Bathurst 12-hour who weren't old enough to have their learners. Now we're talking, and the government's talking about legislation where they're stating that males aren't responsible enough and shouldn't be allowed to drive till they're 21, 22. Well, they didn't care about that when they sent them to war decades ago, did they? They were responsible and old enough then to put their lives on the line. But if you go to an event like the Bathurst 12-hour where the cars are $500,000 each, one of the highest risk circuits in the world, second to Spa-Francorchamps and those sort of tracks, right? And you've got 15-year-olds racing international star drivers and being competitive. There was obviously not a problem with their discipline. There's not a problem with their skill set. There's not a problem with their concentration set. What they've got is everything that every young driver has been denied. That's the difference in their driving. Now, I wanted to touch on a subject that Linda brought up, that a tree fell on her car when her and her daughter were driving.
Yeah.
And this is really traumatic for her. And you can't ignore the trauma. I've had people, it's really interesting. We do a lot of work with the NDIS with special needs and rehab. And rehab's not just I've lost my arm in a crash or I've lost my leg or XYZ. Rehab is somebody's had a crash after 20 years of driving, for 20 years thinking they were fine. And then suddenly they realize they're not. How did this crash happen? Why did they hit me? How did I hit them?
So the trauma.
The trauma.
Yeah.
And I've had them where there was one woman where we'd have to take her husband because she would get so emotional. Anytime we looked like going near a major road, she'd burst into tears. And so I basically said to the husband, you need to be here because I'm really limited as to how much interaction I can and should have in terms of having professional boundaries in place. And we had to go and we had to unpack everything all the way back to, hey, this is why this happened. Now let's go and put the building blocks in place. Let's create some technique. We've got another client who had cerebral palsy where she had a license when she was 18 and crashed with 4 of her friends in the car the day after she got her license. In her 50s, she's still struggling with the belief mechanism that she can drive. There's nothing in terms of the CP that inhibits her ability as a driver, or what I'd call the mechanics. It's all mindset of the trauma of the crash. So when we're doing what I said before about, they call this thing the default. They call that spike the default. Means what happens if we don't do anything. That's how they're writing the legislation. We don't do this in any form of training or education anywhere in the world. And if any business underprepared their supervisors to such a level or initiated such a basic foundation of education in the workplace, the government would shut them down. In fact, you've got where the government continually finds the government because of their shortcomings in their own training. It's hilarious. But we're doing it with the most high-risk activity, with the most vulnerable group of people, and then we're blaming them for the consequences, and they're carrying it for the rest of their lives. So this whole graduated licensing scheme was born from a crash exactly like the ones we're talking about. It happened in northern New South Wales. 4 young blokes killed, the driver survived. And the father that championed to get the laws that we've got now, nobody stopped to think that he was the one that taught his son. He was the one that defined that his son was safe, capable, and proficient as a driver. He took his son to the driving test. And when his son passed the driving test, he said he was great and away you go and live your life, boy. And they championed so hard that they created legislation just to shut him up. And it was literally that. There was one meeting I was in where he declared he was the only expert in road safety in the room because he was the only one that had lost a family member because of it. Now, I've had friends that I've worked with, right? One, their son had neuroblastoma cancer. And it was a most horrific journey, even being on the outside looking in. They had years to understand that their son was going to die. So the younger a child is when they get it, the higher the risk of survival. The older the child, and we're talking 5, 6, 7 that they get it, the lower the risk of survival. So this young lad, he survived years longer than what he was supposed to do. And they were the most amazing couple you could ever meet. And the trauma of losing their only child drove them apart, literally destroyed their marriage. So I get what Linda's going through. I get the trauma the parents go through. But here's what's nuts. And there's no other way to describe it. When we set out to make this documentary, on the way back, as we'd interviewed everybody we wanted to interview on the way down, on the way back, we started calling in and talking to these people that ran not-for-profits on driver education for teens in schools. The common denominator was they'd all lost their own kids through road trauma. They all believed it was the kids' fault. They all ran programs that basically put the responsibility back onto the kids. So their programs were based on fear. Now, remember what I said before. The fear creates the apprehension. The apprehension creates the tension. The tension shuts the vision down. You've got a compromised window of information, which means every decision is now compromised. You've actually exacerbated the problem. You've made it worse, not by a little bit, by a huge amount. Well, what we found was when we'd unpack each one of those crashes, this is how this happened. Now, this particular set of symptoms here, this is when it started back here. Because of this approach and how we're preparing them, this is how this slipped through the gaps. No one taught you. You're not prepared for this role. You shouldn't be in this role. By the time we got back to Queensland, all 3 not-for-profits we'd interviewed had sent an email saying, you stand to gain out of this. We rescind our permission for you to use this footage. Oh, hang on. I thought your job was to fix this thing. And even the not-for-profits, I reached out to one the other day after this whole Bruxton crash came up. They all get government funding for supporting the government narrative. So they stand to make gain, don't they? They were talking about how their son was like this young bloke. He had a crash, killed a few of his mates. And they've now got this not-for-profit where they go around talking to schools and they're amazed on how much they learn. Well, I thought our job was to educate them, not the other way around. So I reached out. This is who we are. This is what we do. I'd love to be involved. No response.
No interest.
Now, this gets even worse. I found out last year, the person that, and as I said last time, I had no idea that this industry that I wound up in existed, this whole performance driving coaching thing, that you even got paid to do something like that. And I wound up working under the most authoritative guy in the world. Mark Knopfler flew out for his birthday in Australia, right? This guy was notorious everywhere. He worked with NASA on designing the training programs for astronauts. He worked with Ford and fixed up the fact that all their engineers were dying when they were developing the Mustang. He was part of the movie, the GT40 thing, Ford versus Ferrari. Like, this guy was God, and I had no idea when I was working for him about the presence of who I was with. Anyway, I met a guy who was his protege, and Frank wanted to fix this problem. We're talking 40, 50 years ago, say. He was singularly focused, I'm going to fix this problem. No, maybe 30 years ago. The government actually stopped him going to schools because they said he was only doing it to further his business interest to steer traffic into his driving centre. Like, if that doesn't make you want to get up and walk to that wall and smash your head in that wall repeatedly at the sheer stupidity of that comment. So what do? We arm the most ill-equipped people, the most ill-informed people, the ones that are suffering the most trauma, and we send them in to traumatize the next generation of drivers. How does that make any sense at all?
Doesn't.
And so when you look at these crashes, the young people that have survived, I really feel for them. They will carry this for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Now, were they being, with what we understand of this Bruxton crash, right? Was he being the most responsible person on planet Earth? No, he's 18. And we were all the same. But that's not worth what's happened to that entire community now, when it could have been easily fixed if we changed the focus on how we prepare them as drivers. And that's all that's missing. That's the one part that we're not missing. And you look at Linda with her comment, it's deeply traumatic.
I want to bring up, I don't know if this is coming up, and we just see. I want to bring, where are we? I've got a message that's come. I might just read it out to you. Let me just put it back onto me. Maybe it'll come up here. No, it didn't even come up there. So the message that I'll read out from Wiley says, here it is. Jeez, I don't know why things don't want to work when I'm around. It says that Gerald Porshman, the road conditions is a big part of the problem. Ruts and potholes significantly reduce coefficient of friction. Because we talked about...
my famous saying that you absolutely love. There's no such thing as a dangerous road, dangerous car, a dangerous set of conditions.
Yeah.
It's what the driver makes of them.
Yeah. Didn't you say last time it was grip versus force?
Everything about driving is grip versus force.
So what Wiley is saying here you don't agree with?
No, I do. You just slow down. But we don't teach them how to slow down. We don't teach them how to brake. We don't teach them how to brake and turn. We don't teach them what to do when it didn't do what it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
There's not one thing in the driving test that addresses anything other than, can you start? Can you stop? Can you stay between the painted lines? Did you follow the rules? And I've seen horrific drivers pass.
Yeah.
I've seen drivers where you just shake your head in disgust and you go, how?
Yeah.
And I've seen brilliant drivers fail because the examiners had this mindset, you've got to fail 2 or 3 times. I don't care how good you are.
Right. Right.
So
yes. Yeah.
every part of the process is fundamentally flawed because we put the wrong people in the wrong places without the necessary skills, and we've ignored all the right people that have got amazing experience and so much to offer, and they want to do it. Greg Murphy champions like you wouldn't believe in New Zealand because the problem is so bad over there. I mean, he's a driver at international caliber. People do not realize at every step, from the moment they first start hopping in go-karts, they are being educated. They are being, I'm not going to say groomed, but it's all about understanding everything you need to do to be the best you can be, right? Where's he in the road safety strategy for New Zealand? Instead, because I had people contacting me about taking my program over there because it was something like $20 million or whatever it was. It was a huge amount of cash. And what they did was what government always did. They set up a special committee that was designated as a not-for-profit that just so happened to get their grant. And their solution? Towards zero. They got a bright pink fluorescent zero, and that was their solution to road safety. Oh, and we're going to make you slow down. But there's plenty of evidence, especially in the States, that shows they call it a bell curve. If you go too fast, you've run out of talent, you've run out of skill.
Yeah.
If you go too slow, they disengage through boredom.
Yes.
And the crash rates are exactly the parallel.
That's true.
So we're not putting effort into improving it. We're just continually dumbing it down, and these crashes become more and more prolific. Our road toll is going up; it's not going down.
Yeah, it's true.
Our cost of the community is
more drivers on the road, more younger drivers on the road. That would be relatable to that.
There was another crash just after these two that we're talking about, and it was your typical suburban family. They were of a different culture. Not that that's got to do anything, but it actually does. It's quite relevant because they taught their son how to drive.
Yeah.
And the moment the son was out on his own, he died. Like, that's what's so wrong about this.
Doesn't make sense.
It's not like they sprained their ankle.
Yeah.
They died.
Yeah.
But, and this is actually quite relevant too.
But that's the fault of the parents that are giving in quite easily to their children who are saying, "I want my license. I want my license."
There is no other form of education where the supervisor can be self-appointed based on relationship alone.
Yeah.
Where the experience factor doesn't come into it in any way, shape or form. Where the student says what they want to do, when they want to do it, and how they want to do it.
Yeah.
The disengagement on every level is truly astounding. I designed an online training program, so I wanted to teach parents how to teach their kids. And the problem is there's still no perception of value within the industry, so you kind of go round and round in circles, knocking your head up against the wall. So I thought, well, why go and waste everything that we've developed? Let's turn it into an online training program. So I put a call out on social media. Who wants this for free? I'm looking for feedback from the parent's perspective. Not one person has actually done it. Out of all the people who said, yep, we want to do it, and when I follow them up, the comment comes, I'm just too busy. But you spoke about the fear that your kid's driving, how unprepared you are, and the symptoms they're giving me of what their kids are doing behind the wheel is next level horrific. It is this in the making. But the parents' mindset is I'm too busy.
What are our statistics compared to the world?
Same. They call it the default. Everywhere in the world is on the same plane of what's going wrong.
So you're talking percentage-wise, we have the same amount of young drivers or road drivers in accidents, same percentage, whether we're in Sweden, Norway,
Correct.
Russia, UK, US.
Yep, because there's no education. If you look at countries like your Scandinavian countries,
So
Finland...
this comment here...
Yeah, this part's really interesting though, and we'll come straight back to this.
Okay.
Your Finland, your Austrians, Scandinavian type countries where there's snow and all that, and they have a heavy focus on driver skill, loss of control and all that, their driver behaviour is very different. But they're spending the equivalent of €100,000 per person, government funded, to prepare them. Now,
What do we spend?
Nothing. You've got the federal government's got a program called Keys to Drive that gives away a free driving lesson to driving schools that subscribe to their theory.
To their narrative, yeah.
And their narrative, learn your own way. If the parents just sit down, shut up, the kids will work how to do it. Well, if that was good, that was how we learned how to drive.
Yeah.
If it was any good, we wouldn't have the problem.
Yeah.
Your statistics are an evidence chart. That's all they are.
Let's have a look at this, because I do want to ask you this question. Do you think, the other question I want to ask is, do you think we should maybe start children driving or starting to prepare them to drive at maybe a younger age, like 12,
Definitely.
13, 14?
Definitely. CAMS, which was the Confederation of Australian Motorsport, and it's now called Motorsport Australia, had a program called the CAMS Ignition Program, and the government basically just snuffed it out.
Okay.
It comes down to, it's really interesting, the older a person is, the higher the fear and emotion, the harder they are to teach, and the longer it takes them to teach. The younger person is, the more receptive they are. Yeah. So the reason our program worked and delivers the results it does is because we're getting them right in the beginning, and we're not giving them a chance to do what they want to do. We're telling them, this is how this works. And we're putting all these pieces in place, and we're running it so tightly that they don't have room to move. And before you know it, that's what they're doing instinctively without thinking about it. There was one young student gave us a fantastic testimonial. He'd gone through your traditional process, done his 100 hours, his 12 months, was out practicing the day before the test, didn't see an intersection. Now, this is the roads he's practicing on for the driving test in his own area. Didn't see a bus. But when I said before about how all this works, his apprehension was high. They get to this space where it's all about the test. And logic goes out the window.
Yeah.
So the vision, the window of information was so compromised, he didn't see the stop signs. He didn't see the intersections. He was watching the bitumen at the end of the road. They all do it.
Yeah.
Responsible, intelligent, smart people.
Yeah.
Everybody does it. Drove straight into a bus, spent the next 12 months being rebuilt. They read him his rights 3 times. 3 times they called the priest in because they didn't think he was going to make it. So say it was 2 years after that, he's finally decided, I want to do this again. And it was, you could see what was wrong. Right from the beginning, you could see what we needed to do.
Let me get to this comment. So Art Monkey says, at Ian McPherson, we don't have a problem. We don't have the problem G-Man is talking about. We have the lowest road deaths in the world. So I think Art Monkey might be US, UK. I'm not too sure where he's from. I know he's a troll.
The US has got a massive problem with it.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. New Zealand, off the charts.
Yeah.
But the roads are higher risk in New Zealand to what they're going through.
So I want to make a call out to anyone who wants to just make a call. You can give a call through. You know what the normal numbers are. I think the normal numbers didn't come up again, but you know what the numbers are. Let me just bring them up here. If it comes up here, what the hell? I'm pushing buttons all over the place. Now I'm all out of focus and everything. If you want to make a call, give us a call because I think it's an important discussion to have. And if you want to know, oh God, why is this? It's because everything shut down earlier on before.
Can imagine the fun we're going to have with EVs, can't you?
With which one?
Electric vehicles.
Oh, don't even start on the electric vehicles. Again, if you want to make a call and talk to Gene about anything, you know what the numbers are. I want to bring the numbers are. So just give us a call and we'll be able to take your call. Steve M. Put your headphones on. We've got Steve M, aka Bond, on. And let's see if we can have a chat to Steve. Let me just see if you're connected, Steve. It looks like you have connected. And let me just put on. Can you hear me, Steve?
Hey, yes. Yes, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, mate. Yourself?
Doing great. I just wanted to comment about some of the things that Gene was talking about, particularly the stress and the tunnel vision. It's been, 54 years since I took driver's ed. And back in that day, it was through our high school. We took a class dedicated towards it, did road driving practice, a lot of classroom. One thing that always stuck with me is they always showed a film of horrific accidents. I mean, it was bleeding bodies, really horrific stuff. And it was meant to scare us straight, literally. That was the goal. Flash forward, we could get our permit at 15 and a half. There were restrictions. An adult had to be in the car with you, nobody else, for your first 6 months of driving. So the day I get my permit, my dad is in the car. I get the permit from the Highway Patrol office, take the test, road test. He says, you drive me downtown. Now we live in a small town. He says, drive me downtown. I have to pick up a suit I'm having altered. We're 2 blocks away. My dad was an ex-Marine, so not as bad as some, but he was kind of hard-nosed. I was so nervous. The first stoplight I came to, I didn't see it. Didn't see the red. Drove right through it. My dad immediately started, what are you doing? Getting on my case, which stressed me further so much that I got to the second stoplight and ran it. It was red. I was so stressed. I didn't even see that it was red. And so it's very true. I mean, it's been 54 years, but I don't think that our schools and our drivers' education is any different. But I will tell you, I've got a granddaughter that's within a year is going to be taking driver's ed. They still allow the 15 and a half permit.
She takes it online, though.
But so I can verify that what Gene's saying is, I mean, he's the expert, and but there's real life consequences. It was so traumatic to me at 15 and a half that I was probably a much better driver than I would have been. Maybe, but I was always stressed when my dad was in the car. So, but I will say that his comment about the people, young drivers, being more responsible when their friends are in the car. I will say this: unless I was on a date with a girl, if it was just my buddies, I don't think I drove any different just because they were in the car. I don't know that I drove any safer. I didn't think like that. I did when I had a girl in the car.
Yeah.
So, but
if I could just say something on that, what we found
Sure.
it was a level of education, the road safety campaigns, the fear that they had meant that they were taking ownership of that risk when their friends are in the car more than when they're on their own. The universal challenge with drivers is none of us think that we hop into a car to crash. Yet all of us criticize the people that we're sharing the road with for their driver behavior.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the irony of that.
Yeah. Mate, you make a lot of great comments there, and I, you know what, I agree with what you're saying. And, you know, the reason I had Gene come in again, in fact, Gene reached out to me and said, we got so much more to discuss. The reason I have him in here is that so we can just maybe unpack some of these things here. Mate, do you have anything, any final words to add? I've just got another caller coming through, but anything else you want to add?
Anecdote.
Yes, mate.
One last anecdote, and then a happy birthday to Sir Rudy tomorrow.
No, next week.
Next week.
Yeah.
One last anecdote. My wife and I have started watching for probably the past 6 months. We kind of watch the YouTube videos of dash cam videos, people getting in wrecks. You see it. And two things have come out of that. We pay much more attention to our driving, and we have put in a forward and rear dash cam. There's the evidence if we do get in a wreck.
Yeah.
But we do find ourselves kind of hooked on those videos, as well as, wow, you know, it's so easy for that to happen.
We also watch
and we also watch the Australian dash cams, just on the side. So y'all have a good evening or good morning, and cheers, Sir Rudy.
Thanks, Bond.
Okay.
See you, mate.
Wow. Bye-bye.
So you agree with a lot of those comments there? We have, I got another caller that's come through ending in 580. Who we got there?
You got Ricky, as you called me on the with the pictures before.
Yep. You're
so
on.
This is Brad.
Yep.
Yeah. Now I want to say good morning to both of you. It's evening here, but I'm here in North Carolina, and I just wanted to kind of unpack something that Gene had said about, you know, they kind of left people to their own devices in, you know, basically they teach you the rules and that's pretty much it. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. It's the only form of education where people are allowed to teach themselves, and they call it learn your own way.
Okay. Well, here in North Carolina, we started out, you get your learner's permit at about 15 when I went through, almost 40 years ago. So when we went through, we had to, you know, it was kind of like that. You did do some basic driving, but I'll be honest with you, it really didn't hit home until my father, who's from the mountains of Virginia, decided he was going to teach me how to drive, and the best way he knew was on the back roads of Virginia. And he took me up there in my mom's car, and he was in his truck, and he said, "Follow me down."
And did that work for you?
It worked, but I have to say that it didn't really sink in until I went through my basic law enforcement training and I had further training, kind of like what you were saying about being taught how to deal with hazardous conditions. And believe it or not, being able to control that vehicle going down the mountain came back up when I went through basic law enforcement training.
Yeah.
They actually, all the principles that my father was explaining to me, because he explained it to me first, because he knew I'm one of those people, I got to understand how it works. So he explained how the, go ahead.
One of the really interesting things that we found when we thought we'd designed the perfect widget to roll out, we then got students at various ranges in their development, and we sat them in a car where they had to drive looking through a camera. And what we learned really quickly was their version of what we were saying was completely different to our version of what we were saying. And it made us go back and rethink the entire course, because it's called embodied cognitive skill. It's our brain's natural process for managing threats and hazard information, and it's for our natural environments to walk and run. So ironically, what your dad did when he took you onto that road was you learnt to hang on, still looking in the same place. You might have picked your eyes up 20 or 30 meters, or 100 feet for you guys, but it was still a very compromised window compared to the way that your dad saw. But your father didn't understand how to express or explain that to you, because he didn't know that there was a difference in how you were looking compared to what he was looking. So as your driving improved, that is, you got to the point where you went into law enforcement, those same messages had a completely different impact, because now you understood the relevance for it. And we forget that when we're teaching teens how to drive.
I agree 100%. I just wanted to give that little perspective, because it's something that when you go through it, like you said, not everything sinks in at the time.
Correct.
It's when you revisit that it actually makes sure that you get it. And just to kind of give you a counterpoint to how I learned, I had a best friend. The man was a one-man demolition derby. I say that he destroyed more cars as a civilian than he ever did in the military. And we always gave him a hard time about it. His wife won't even let him drive her anywhere. But that's, we give him a hard time about it, but we found out later, his perception's a little bit different from ours. It's one of those things where some of this is you have to teach to that student's perception.
Well, that's understanding. Yeah, it's understanding what it is that you're actually teaching, and creating a training environment where you bring those two objectives together. The objective of how they think and how they see what their values are and what yours are, and you have to find that middle road. So the scariest driver training I used to do was when we'd coach people that would compete in events like Target Tasmania and so forth. So they would come to us thinking that we were going to instantly make them drive faster, when the whole problem was they were overdriving the car at every point, which is why it was slow. So those first half a dozen laps, you were literally hanging on for grim death, trying to slow them down so you could start to talk to them before you could even start to improve their driving.
I can understand that completely. And that's kind of the thing. You got to meet them where they're at, so to speak.
Correct. Yeah. And it takes a long time to train a great instructor. It takes me 3 to 6 months. I've never been able to do it quicker. So the whole idea of a parent with no training can do this job is absolutely mind-blowing. It shouldn't be allowed. And it's no disrespect for the parents. They're just not prepared in any way for what this particular role is. And the consequence of the role is death. And even worse than death is maiming We don't go into that. More people survive crashes that previously would have been killed. So we think because the crash rate isn't increasing at the growth of the population rate, that therefore the problem's not getting better. The problem's actually getting worse because the improvement in engineering of vehicles and roads means they're surviving what they didn't survive before, but they're carrying those injuries for the rest of their life. They're not contributing members of society anymore. We're supporting them. And it's horrific for them.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen trauma too many times to count, so I agree with you. And I can say that in my experiences, the when people have those issues and you have that trauma, and like you said, they no longer are really contributing.
Correct.
So
yeah.
it becomes a problem.
But they're not living a quality life either. And that's what the objective should be, that we all live a quality life. And we know what the problem is. We know, and there are sections in our community that are passionate and want to fix a problem and know how to fix a problem. But we're isolating them from the objective because it doesn't suit a narrative. And that's where the problem comes down to. There was a comment there about we have advanced driving courses, but they're too expensive. It costs me $2,500 to hire the RACQ driver training facility, right? So I've got a demographic that don't understand why they should do it, therefore they don't see the need to pay for it. Then you've got the cost of your staff. You're looking at a $5,000 to $6,000 cost before you even make a profit to run a course that, as Dr. Tom McCaskill wrote in one of his hypnosis on the business, those courses would save New South Wales $1 billion a year. So that's a numerical value. So to try and run those courses, it's high risk as a business, it's very low return as a business, and the marketing you need is going in direct conflict with the marketing that the government is doing. So therefore, they're disengaging you from your client base that would and should pay for it anyway. That's your problem.
Do you think what we tend to do is that we don't want to spend the money in the areas that are really needed, but we'll spend the money in other crap that is not needed?
1,000%. And then we go and blame the participant for the fact that we never taught them in the first place.
Yeah. Brad, thank you so much for your call, mate. If you want to add something else in, we're going to start to slowly wrap up because, we'll add another 5 minutes to this because we lost some time earlier on with the internet.
There's another interesting comment there from Teresa Waddell. Call driving schools. So Ferg Span, all right? Ferg Span was saying, what do you do for people with high anxiety and that sort of thing? The person's response was call driving schools and they'll explain. Here is the stupidity of this. The only thing you need to be a driving school is to sit a 4-day course in how to run a small business. And you are actively told that you will learn the rest as you go. The only thing you need to be a driving examiner is work behind the counter at a transport office, regardless of state, and they run you through an internal course on the road rules, and then suddenly you're a qualified assessor as a driving examiner. So everyone learns from their own perspective, and some of the stuff I have read on these driving instructor performances, again, it's enough to make you want to pack your bags, bugger off, and go and do something else. Because when you've got people like Frank Gardner that have participated on a global scale at the level of research that was going on with entities like NASA, and the entire industry and governance is ignoring that, then you've got a much, much bigger problem than how qualified is a driving instructor. Because the level of knowledge is not filtering through. And if you look at top-level motorsport, we discussed this last time, why is there no Mark Webber Driving Academy? We do it with swimmers. We do it with football players.
Do it with tennis players.
Because there's no perception of value. Now, his whole life was about learning. It was being surrounded by engineers. It was unpacking the finest detail of every part of the process to be a world champion. And we don't give that to the demographic that's at highest risk and needs it the most. Instead, we blame them because we isolated them from that level of knowledge and skill.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I just wanted to say thank you for your time. I hope you both have a great day. And cheers to Rudy and G-Man.
Thanks very much. Cheers, mate.
All right. Have a good one. Bye, mate.
Bye.
Gene, it's come around that time again.
It has.
It just comes so quick, and especially after, you're a wealth of knowledge. And I think what we should do is that, maybe this should be a monthly session.
I'm up for that.
We
Sounds
just
good.
come here and we pick something and we start talking about why people have, the loss of life for me is just when you think of the way that we can be prevented, and I know it can be prevented. I did the drive, from here to Cairns. I've done it a few times now, and yeah, sure, I know about the roads and the conditions, but there was even a point where I was live streaming, and there was a particular car that had overtook me on a country road up in Atherton, and could have quite easily been a head-on.
Yep.
If I had been a little bit faster, he would have clipped him.
In perspective, I did a car rally with a group of motor racing people, right? And really, really cool things to do. They're great fun. At the end of the day, when we're all back, having a celebratory meal and all this, the common thread was, how different is it driving with a group of people who actually know what they're doing?
Yeah, so true.
Yeah,
mate. Let's have a look at this clip here as we do a closing video. Have a check this out. Have you seen this?
yeah, I have.
Now I know this has got nothing to do with car driving, but I think the precision and the skill here is pretty amazing.
Yeah. He's done that a few times too, I reckon.
I think so. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, look at that. Just put a piece of paper through that.
How many times has he done that? That's a real question.
Yeah, and what's he got? He's got the Toyota,
It's a race team truck
it's a
or
race
something.
team. I think yeah. Well done.
So I'd say that'd be the entrance into one of the tracks.
You think?
Yeah, because there's a truck coming the other way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no way that could be a public road, so that's what it would be. That's why he's so well skilled at it.
All right, people, put your headphones on. That's what I should have done before. Where's my little... I'll do it next time. I'll be back on tomorrow at 9 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time with the regular show. So much news to go through, so many things to talk about. We're going to get Gene back here next month to talk about more road safety. Put your headphones on for the closing music. And it's going to be Rudy's birthday in 6 days, and I won't be here. Ah, well, that's what happens. Thanks, everyone.
All hail Rudy.
Actually, what I should do is give you a link to that online program with a freebie pass, and you can send it out to all these people. It's easy to misinterpret that one, isn't it?
All right, good people. Last comment will go there to Char Char. Great show, Gerald. Thank you so much. John Page. Bye, everyone. Have a good one, people. We'll see you tomorrow, 9 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time.